We have one more presenter before we're going to take a formal break here in 1310 Anthony. And I'd like to introduce Dave Weatherspoon. Dave is a professor in agriculture, food, and resource economics. And Dave, you want to come up here? And we've got you all queued up. And the clicker to the right is to advance, and left is to go back.
Good morning. So I've been doing this work for about the past decade and thinking about why the last mile of the food supply chain doesn't work. I focus particularly when it comes to the urban poor and getting healthy, quality food at a regular price being that of what you find in the suburbs. And so I came to this by doing work on supermarkets in Africa, of all places. And when I started that work, firms were moving in to urban areas in Africa, and the population had an average income of $1 a day. And then I come to fly back home and see no investment in Detroit or Flint or Baltimore or Philadelphia, or any of those cities at that time. And you'd see this investment would be a circle around most cities, particularly around the poor area. Or in Detroit's case, it's a half circle, right? As a hard border. And so you say, what would explain this? And the old economic arguments that I agreed with prior to seeing what was happening in Africa just didn't hold up. And so it makes you think of, are there other explanations? And there are economic stories that would explain this, but it's ones that we can't prove, such as collusion. It's very difficult to prove. Only the federal government could require enough data to analyze that and prove or disprove. Okay? So we have to then look at all the other steps towards that. And that's what my process has been in trying to understand what is going on and how do we explain this in economic terms. One of the limiting factors in analyzing food deserts is data. Data is the most limiting constraint, and that is because I have access to national databases, but food deserts mean that you don't have information on those as well, because in order to get that data, you have to have a supermarket that participates in the data collection. And so if there's supermarkets aren't there, there's no information. And so the best data out there is that of which people collect. And it's difficult to convince firms to give you their information. So there's all kinds of constraints, and it's a stepwise process. So I'm going to lead you through some of our findings that are published, and one that's not yet, to help you understand what we know about urban poor consumer behavior food purchases. Okay? So one of the first things that firms always state is there demand? You know, if we built a supermarket there, would people purchase? Another thing is, does distance really matter? The one thing, if you invest around the outskirts of any city, you know that people are going to come to you one way or another, whether it's directly or indirectly. Maybe some of the convenience stores actually purchase from the Sam's Club and then bring it to the convenience store closer to the population. And does policy play a role in addressing this issue? Now, the latter part of my research has been focused on what are the implications, the health implications for those populations, particularly when you face higher costs of access. And then, is investing enough? Have we been in this situation so long that even if you invest now, there's a lot of other things that have to happen before people change eating behaviors and have a positive outcome? And then this nutrition education, can it drive healthy purchases. So this is from our different papers of our research, and it's just to show you that consumers are different. And I took out all the math and all that and just gave you a nice table that shows that, you know, one of the questions is will people buy fresh fruits and vegetables? That's one of the, you know, limiting factors that we always think about in food deserts. And so you see that, okay, bananas, well, we did some changes. Okay, I should mention that this is predominantly Hispanic area in Detroit. This is from the supermarket. This is predominantly African American community in Detroit, which is the NGO, and this is my national data. Okay? And so, on average, for the most transactions that you see, what is it? And you'll see that they're different, particularly here in this community, it's quite different. And this has a lot of implications. It has implications for firm investment. If you don't know what the demand is for certain categories, and you bring in, and you don't have avocado, for example, you're not going to do well in that community. We also know that from another set of analysis, avocado drives the demand for several different categories. It's almost like what we call a lost leader in some of these other, you know, there's milk and bread in the national data, but it's avocado in this store. Okay? So you need to understand your consumers, know what your consumers are in order for your investment to get a good return, right? We do the same thing for vegetables as well. So another set of findings, and this is from 2014 data from a predominantly Hispanic survey market. There's a program called Dept Food Bucks, which I'm sure that most of you are familiar with. And at that time, it was you spend 10, you get 10, you get spend it on Michigan produce. Okay? Now it's in more states. So on. This first year in the supermarket, we had a pretty dismal rate of usage of that program, a redemption of what we would call free money, right? You spend 10, you get $10. You get a card, and you get to spend $10 more on Michigan fruit and vegetables. Out of the eligible SNAP participants at that store, only 1.87 was redeemed out of all the transactions. It's unbelievable numbers, and it baffled us because, as economists, there's nothing better than free money, right? So we obviously kept digging into this. It increased so we had before, during, and after. So it increased significantly the purchase of vegetables, but not the purchase of fruits. Okay, that's one finding. It also, the effect went away, meaning that once the program was no longer, then the consumption went back to its original, or the purchase rather, went back to the original rate. So that's kind of bad. So not sustainable without the financial consent. And that makes you wonder about that question of, well, have we been in this situation so long that maybe there's a lot more than money that has to be allocated here to change behavior. Another thing that we looked at was demand for colors. Okay, so nutritionists, and I see Catherine's here, she'll have to help me. Nutritionists say that, well, USDA is promoting that you need to consume multiple colors to have a healthy diet. And so no one has actually looked at that before from an economic perspective, because prices are different based on, if you think of the different fruit and vegetables, prices are quite different, right? And so consumers demand fruits and vegetables in this store quite differently, and there's a strong preference for green and white fruits and vegetables. Okay. And it's almost like a staple. We found that this red, blue, purple, if you think of berries and all, right, particularly on the fruit side, those was what people really wanted, like a luxury good. And they would buy if they had more money. But it is at a point where, it's just too costly. And so the demand for this is high, but the income isn't high enough to increase the consumption of purchase. And then we found a lot of substitution between colors. Okay, and so the orange and these colors were lacking in the diet. We believe we don't have 24-hour recall data. We just have what they purchase. So we assume if you purchase it, you're not eating it from another source. And then another study says that shows that supermarkets are still reluctant to enter, and we're still working on that, trying to model it on what would first mover advantage look like. If you move into a region, it seems that people would reward you by seeing you as a brand that is a quality brand and continue serving from you. So one of the things that has been baffling to me is that on our national data, distance from home to supermarket has never been significant. And from the Detroit data and other data and other independent studies from Louisiana, distance has always been an issue. And so that one's baffling to me, and I'm not sure why that happens, but it leads me to wonder what's in my national data. How poor are the poor in my national data? Do they reflect what we see, in particularly Rust Belt type cities? And I think that's where the issue is. It's data, not the phenomenon. And then the other things that we've shown is that demand is sufficient in Detroit to quote a number of stores. Just from using the SNAP dollars alone, you have in a number of blocks, census blocks, enough to float a number of stores. But we see only a couple that have just a little bit across the board. And so we need to think a lot more about our location decision models, supermarket location decision models, and that's what we're working on now. And then more competition is needed in these markets, obviously, and the competition can come in any form, including the farmers market. And I would love to be able to analyze farmers markets the way I analyze this. The problem is you don't get standard data type output. And so it's not a fair comparison. I really can't say anything about it, right? Because it's just not, we're not able to understand how prices change. At the end of the day, prices may change. In a supermarket, it's at the first of the week. Okay, so it's quite different type of analysis. But those are the things that we're thinking about related to urban food deserts. And I must be there.
We're fine.
Okay.
Hey.
We've got two questions here for you. You can read the question first.
All right. Did ease of using the Double Up Food Bucks card factor into your analysis of the Double Up consent? So we do not have individual information. We only have scanner data information. So that was one of the things we thought about. We thought that maybe it's too big of a hurdle. $10 might be too big of a hurdle. And now they've changed the program so that it's a spend $1, get $1. I think that's a much better program, a policy approach to increasing purchases. And it's no longer just Michigan produce either. So those adjustments, we hope will make a big difference. And we hope to secure that data and do the analysis. But I can't tell you if that is a major constraint or not. Second question. Does this research consider individuals' ability to prepare, cook with fresh fruits and vegetables, but the impact of cooking education? In the African American community that we did the analysis in, yes, it did consider that. And we asked that question directly. It was a problem with a number of households not having the ability to cook. In fact, it was pretty interesting. People would buy things that they could consume immediately because storage was an issue and cooking was an issue. So yes, that definitely played into that.
We have time. We have one. Any question?
Whole Foods in Detroit seems to be very successful with support from a variety of persons, social, economic, and racial. I can't read this, and I know how to read, but I can't read the something price.
Sorry about that. With the high prices.
Higher prices, okay, than most. How do you account for such success? I talked with Whole Foods a number of times. They said they were going to give me their data, and then I think they realized what research means, and I never got the data. Okay, so in meeting with them and watching who's in their store, they have a belt around them, so they have a security blanket with the hospital and the university, and so I think there's a different income group that's coming in there, and it's enough. Because that was one of the higher grossing stores, I was told from the CEO. They were shocked at how big the demand was there. So that tells me there's a lot of pent up demand, and there's different income levels floating around Detroit as well, either coming into work or living in some pockets of Detroit. So I don't think it's the population I'm dealing with. That's my answer to the question. I don't think, I know that the population I was researching in the African American side, which is the closest one to that Whole Foods store. They're not shopping there.